Well, let me just ask you to answer my question. Has anyone from the White House contacted you about personnel decisions?
Generally speaking, we always discuss with the White House, OMB, during the budget process, how many personnel we need, who we need where.
Answer is yes.
For budgetary purposes and
directed to fire people, agents, because they participated in investigations of the president?
I don't receive directions to do that.
When someone raises their right hand and swears an oath before the United States Senate, it's supposed to mean something. But what if those words are just for show? January 2025, Kash Patel sits before a Senate committee, promising fairness, no political retaliation, no firings over assignments, equal standards for every FBI employee, clear, on-the-record commitments. 7 months later, everything changes. 3 veteran FBI agents, with a combined 60 years of service, file a lawsuit against him, accusing their own director of politically motivated retaliation. Then comes a bigger blow. The FBI Agents Association, representing 90% of active agents, calls Patel unqualified and unfit. That's not a small disagreement. That's the workforce turning on its leader. And when Senator Richard Blumenthal steps in, he brings Patel's exact January statements with him, ready to ask one simple question. Did you lie?
Thank you, Mr. Patel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, thank you for being here today. You'll recall well in January at your confirmation hearing before this committee, I raised the prospect of politically motivated retaliation, and you promised me, as you did other members of this committee, quote, every FBI employee will be held to the absolute same standard and no one will be terminated for case assignments. You went on to tell me, quote, all FBI employees will be protected against political retribution. And you assured one of my colleagues that you would honor the internal review process of the FBI. I'm not going to mince words. You lied to us. In the short time that you've been FBI director, you've presided over a rash of retaliatory firings. 3 FBI agents have recently sued you. They are FBI agents with 60 years between them of distinguished service, rescuing hostages, saving kids from predators, dismantling drug cartels, and their allegations, their civil allegations, are a searing indictment of your tenure as FBI director. But it's not just those 3. The FBI Agents Association has said that your actions, quote, distract agents from their work, foster fear that their assignments could cost them their careers, either now or under the next administration, and increase the risk of criminal and national security threats by undermining unity and morale within the Bureau, end quote. This association, as you know, is voluntary. It represents 14,000 members, 90% of all the active agents. These are your employees saying that your performance has been unqualified and unfit. And there is mounting evidence that these retaliatory firings were the result of direction from the White House. There have been instances in the past history of the Bureau of political interference and political direction from the director's office, but not the kind of institutional interference that we're seeing from the White House right now. I'm going to ask you, has anyone from the White House contacted you about personnel decisions?
I completely disagree with your entire premise that I have lied or am misleading the FBI. If I were, the results that I announced today by the men and women of the FBI and the historic records we are doing to keep this country safe would not be possible. The men and women of the FBI are responding to our leadership and this administration's priorities. The only way people get terminated at the FBI is if they fail to meet the muster of the job and their duties. And that is where I will leave it. And you accusing me of lying is something I don't take lightly, but I'm not going to get into a tit for tat with you.
Well, let me just ask you to answer my question. Has anyone from the White House contacted you about personnel decisions?
Generally speaking, we always discuss with the White House, OMB, during the budget process, how many personnel we need, who we need where.
Answer is yes.
For budgetary purposes and
directed to fire people, agents, because they participated in investigations of the president?
I don't receive directions to do that.
Has anyone
I make the
suggested
decisions.
it? Has anyone asked you to do it? The best information is yes, you've taken suggestions and direction from the White House in firing qualified agents.
Any termination at the FBI was a decision that I made based on the evidence that I have as a director of the FBI, and it's my job, and I'm not going to shy away from it. And as you stated, those are allegations, and that is an ongoing litigation. So they'll have their day in court, so will we.
The allegations are not just in that lawsuit, Director Patel, and I think your testimony confirms that, in fact, you've taken direction from the White House in those retaliatory firings.
It literally does not.
Because you've acknowledged that, in fact, they have been in contact with you about personnel decisions.
The White House has been, do not put words in my mouth, we're on the record. The White House, like any administration, contacts its agencies on the budgeting process and where it needs personnel and where the mission priorities are. That always happens. If they didn't do that, they would be abdicating the responsibility to law enforcement. I will always work with my partners in the chain of command at the Department of Justice and the White House to ensure that this FBI is delivering the results we are delivering, to include the lowest murder rate in modern U.S. history, to include the most fentanyl seizures in modern U.S. history, to include the most lives saved and the most children found in modern U.S. history. That is a working FBI. That is not a failing FBI.
Let's move on to a related area. In White House discussions, have you been asked or directed by the White House or others to engage in a crackdown on political groups or organizations, nonprofits, after the murder of Charlie Kirk?
To direct at political organizations? No. I've been asked by my chain of command to properly root out criminal activity wherever it is in whatever investigation we are conducting, and that's what we're doing.
Have those distinctions about whom you're going to target been based on direction from the White House?
Nobody gives me a list on who to target. My targeting list is from the men and women at the FBI.
Have you talked about investigating certain groups, nonprofits, or foundations or institutions?
Whatever those investigations are, they're ongoing, and I'm not going to get into those.
Have you used polygraphs to determine loyalty of agents?
No.
Have you committed that you will respect the First Amendment rights of agents?
I have wildly committed to respecting the First Amendment rights of agents, but at the FBI, you have to balance your First Amendment rights with your mission.
Have you imposed any sort of loyalty test in the course of using polygraphs or in any of the other personnel decisions?
Polygraphs have been utilized at the FBI for decades. They will continue to be utilized in the fashion by the professionals that administer them.
Have you asked under the polygraph test about individuals' loyalty or about their voting records or any kind of past statement?
Just to make it abundantly clear, I don't tell the professionals how to conduct polygraphs or what questions to ask. They make those decisions. And I, as the director of the FBI, never ask anyone who they voted for.
Have you investigated donors to a political party simply because they are donors?
Simply based on that fact alone? No.
Have you investigated donors for another reason?
Many donors may be involved in criminal enterprises and criminal activities, and those individuals will be investigated.
Can you commit to make public the Epstein files that so far have not been released, if this committee is able to review them on a classified basis?
I think this is an important distinction. The Epstein case file is not classified to my understanding. So we are providing what we legally can, and we are going to give Congress what we are legally permitted to do so to the maximum extent of the law.
Will you enable the chairman and the ranking member to review them on a classified basis?
That doesn't make any sense. If the material in the Epstein file is not classified, there is no basis for a
Well, it
classified
would protect
review.
the confidentiality of them if they were able to review them on a classified basis.
If anyone in this room can get the multiple district court judges to lift their court protective orders in the ceilings, we will happily provide you with more information.
Are you in favor of merging the DEA and the ATF?
That's not something for me to comment on.
Well, those agencies work with you, don't they?
With me, not for me.
Are you in favor of orienting the FBI toward a national police function as opposed to the enforcement of federal law?
The FBI does enforce federal law across the country. That's what we do.
But isn't it a fact that you have told the leadership of the FBI that you view it as moving toward a local and state police function?
No, we are prioritizing working with our local and state partners, and they will tell you that that has never happened with this much engagement in the history that they have been serving as local law enforcement officers. I believe local cops are the best intelligence source and the best understanding of their communities, and I folded in my FBI agents under that direction to work with them to get the job done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The entire hearing built toward one moment, one exchange, one question that mattered more than all the others combined. Did the White House direct the firings? Patel's answer: the White House contacts the FBI on budgetary matters, how many personnel are needed, where they should be deployed. And he's right, that is routine. That's how government works. Nobody disputes that. But here's the problem: that's not what Blumenthal asked. The question wasn't whether the White House communicates with the FBI. Of course they do. The question was whether the White House directed specific personnel terminations. Whether someone at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue pointed at a list of names and said, "These agents need to go." Those are two completely different things. One is normal interagency coordination. The other is political interference in what's supposed to be an independent law enforcement agency. And Patel never answered the second question. He answered the first one, over and over again. When Blumenthal tried to pin him down, pointing out that Patel had just confirmed the White House had been in contact about personnel decisions, Patel snapped back, "Do not put words in my mouth." Except they weren't Blumenthal's words, they were Patel's own words. He said it, out loud, on the record, in a Senate hearing with cameras rolling. Now let's talk about the FBI Agents Association for a second, because this matters. This isn't some partisan advocacy group or political opposition. This is a voluntary organization representing 14,000 members, 90% of all active FBI agents. These are the people who show up every single day, run the investigations, chase down leads, and put their careers and lives on the line. When that group releases a public statement calling their own director's performance unqualified and unfit, that's not spin. That's not a talking point. That's the workforce rejecting their leadership. And how did Patel respond? With numbers. 23,000 violent criminals arrested, 6,000 weapons seized, 4,000 children found. The stats are real and they're important, but they're also a deflection. Blumenthal wasn't asking about arrest numbers or seizure rates. He was asking who gave the order to fire decorated agents with 60 years of combined service. He was asking whether the White House was calling the shots on personnel decisions that should have been independent. Patel never answered that. He pivoted. He cited the stats. He accused Blumenthal of twisting his words, but he never closed the loop on the actual question. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the hearing files doesn't just cover the sound bites, we cover the record. You lied to us. That was Blumenthal's opening line, and by the end of the hearing, Patel never gave him a reason to take it back.